Tell me if this sounds familiar. You sit down to go over finances and budget. You get all motivated, you agree to be stricter, order less takeout, stop getting things online, and finally hit financial goals. But then as the days and weeks go on, the motivation starts to melt away, and it's not long before you're shamefully buying takeout lunch or bringing in another online order from the front porch. It seems like a history is doomed to repeat itself scenario because as careful and conscious as we can get about our spending, somehow it's always too easy to slip up. And that got me wondering, why is it so hard to just cut back on spending? You know it's impacting your budget. You know it's slowing the progression of financial goals. It doesn't seem that hard to just not buy things.
It's called don't buy stuff you cannot afford.
And yet it is. And so I did what I always do when I need to understand something deeper, and that was obsessively research why are we this way. And after hours and hours and countless articles and studies later, what I found is there are a lot of things at play when it comes to making a purchase. Trying to find one culprit to overspending is like looking in the trees instead of the forest. I think that's the right idiom.
Idiom, sir? Idiom!
I don't know. What I'm trying to say is like not seeing the whole picture. But the more aware I became about the whys, the easier I found it not to buy. And suddenly I had this aha moment about breaking the habit of spending. Now, the first two things that I learned are what I consider to be the obvious culprits when it comes to overbuying. These were things that I kind of already knew. One, you're constantly being marketed to. In an article from Forbes, it suggests that we see between 4,000 and 10,000 ads in a single day. And that article from Forbes was from 2017, so I can only imagine what it is now. It's estimated that 1 in every 3 posts that you get on social media is selling you something, and the marketing is becoming smarter and more exact. The average American is tracked by over 2,000 different data brokers, all tracking your scrolls, your app time, your search history to create super hyper-targeted ads that are timed and placed to catch you specifically at your peak vulnerability for shopping. And number 2 is we now have what I like to call frictionless spending. Purchasing things has become way too easy. We have apps, websites, and digital wallets all designed to reduce the barriers between wanting and buying. On shopping apps, you can buy with one click and save your face or fingerprint ID so you don't even have to type out a single character in order to check out. Stores have tap to pay, and you literally don't even need to have your wallet. You have subscribe and save options, which charges you and sends you things on autopilot. And listen, I'm not saying this is all horrible. Convenience is nice, but more and more in life, I have started to find myself asking if the convenience of things is worth the trade-off. Not just with buying, but with so many different aspects of my life. I've talked with you guys about this in the past, about convenience illusion. And this is when something appears to be making our lives more convenient, but it's actually taking more of our time or our mental energy, or in some cases, our money. And when we're on a shopping app, it will use, like your prior shopping data to suggest something else you might need. And then you can buy that with one click and it'll arrive within 24 hours. That's really great, right? It's super convenient, except that all went so fast that it has removed any of the time where you would usually stop and say to yourself, wait, do I need this? Do I want this? Is this in my budget? Our mind wants to believe that if it's convenient, it must be right, because I'm gonna be honest with you guys, our brains associate ease with correctness. They're like, this is easy, so it must be right. Now, constantly being marketed to and frictionless buying are, as I mentioned, 2 of the more obvious ones that I think a lot of us realize are happening. But what I've learned is there are a lot of other things at play when it comes to buying something. There are so many things. Again, trees and forest. The next thing is emotional spending. Emotional spending happens when we buy to soothe a feeling like stress or boredom rather than buying out of necessity. And for a long time, I personally didn't think that I was an emotional spender because I wasn't somebody who would stress shop. I didn't buy things out of boredom. But what I've learned is emotional spending isn't always that obvious or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like treating yourself or justifying a purchase by saying, I deserve this. And I was definitely guilty of that. I was also guilty of productivity spending. This is when you buy things to solve a perceived problem or because that product is going to improve your life. And you would do this when you were overwhelmed. And in the end, if you're buying to fix a feeling, it's emotional spending. The other thing that's at play when it comes to buying is the habit loop that it forms. And this is probably what I found the most wildly interesting when I was researching and I dived into the most. I obviously already knew about habit loops. Most of us have heard about it. The term was coined by Charles Duhigg in his book, The Power of Habit. And a habit loop is essentially made of 3 parts. There's your cue, your routine, and your reward. So a really basic way to explain this, if you don't know, is a cue would be you're thirsty. The routine is you drink water. This is not water, this is coffee. It's fine, it's an example. And the reward is you're not thirsty anymore. Your brain says, okay, cool, that worked. So next time you're thirsty, you'll drink water and not feel thirsty anymore. And so a habit loop is formed in your brain. Your brain creates these loops to save energy. Again, remember your brain likes ease. And when it comes to shopping, there are a lot of cues that make us shop. It could be something as basic as I'm low on toothpaste or something a little more complicated like I'm feeling bored. But once that cue is triggered, the routine will kick in. We open a shopping app, we start browsing, maybe we toss in a few extras to the cart. The reward, a hit of dopamine, either from solving the problem, yay, my toothpaste is on its way, or from the thrill of looking for something new and adding it to the cart. But here's the kicker that you need to understand about dopamine when it comes to shopping, and that is that the dopamine spike doesn't come when we actually get the item. It comes from the anticipation of the purchase. It's not owning items that makes us feel good, it's the pursuit of them. Because our biology is wired for the chase. Dopamine spikes not when we get what we want, but in those moments just before. So we're constantly left chasing the next thing in this sort of vicious cycle like a hamster on a wheel, and that is essentially the engine of consumerism. And not to mention, since it's the chase that feels so good, it makes sense why so many of us enjoy scrolling shopping apps, spending hours searching various websites for the perfect t-shirt. It's the thrill of the hunt. And with the internet, you can search for something basically until the end of time. Now, I do want to stop for a second here and say that buying does not need to be the devil. Obviously, I am chatting about how we can work on limiting overbuying or ending our overbuying and some other major realizations that I've had when it comes to buying. But not everything in life needs to be all this way or all that way. Getting in control of your buying doesn't mean you never buy anything. Sometimes we can use a no-buy month to get our perspective on spending right, but just like with, minimalism, right? If you want to practice minimalism, it doesn't mean you have to live in a house with 1 cup, 1 spoon, and 1 pair of shoes in order to reap the benefits of minimalism. And it's the same way with this. I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes when we get caught up in something, we really think that it needs to be all or nothing. And most of the times it does not. And spending is the same way. As I started to learn these things about spending and these different things that impacted my spending, I decided I wanted to do a no-buy month. And I thought it might just be good to hit reset on my spending, to swear off unnecessary purchases for a full month to sort of get back to baseline. And I did share a whole video about my no-buy month, and I will link that down below. But I kind of went into it with this new information about why it is we buy. And after we finished the first week, my husband and I did it together, we sat down to do a spending check-in, and we were able to see all the money that we had saved this week. It was really fun to share the things that we almost bought and we didn't, and get really creative finding things to eat that didn't involve spending. And it's sort of fun at first. And I realized it actually was really motivating to not spend something. So then, of course, I got curious. If we get dopamine from shopping, can we get it from not shopping too? And you know what that means. It's time for some more obsessive researching. And what I found out was yes. Dopamine, as we discussed, is a chemical designed to motivate. It's associated with feelings of pleasure in order to motivate us into doing things. When you consider buying something, dopamine spikes in anticipation of that reward. If you don't buy it, and you don't give your brain the reward that it is anticipating, the habit loop is left feeling incomplete. But if you pause and you consciously register that the decision is a win, like I stuck to my goal or I just saved $40, then you're giving your brain that reward, and thus the habit loop completes. And that's why I say what I really learned about shopping is that it all comes down to being aware and understanding why it is that we shop. Early in my no-buy month, and honestly still to this day, every time I almost buy something and I don't, I make sure to actively notice it. And I will say, wow, I just saved $50, or you know what, it feels really great to leave this store empty-handed. And what I was doing was teaching my brain to associate not buying with a different kind of satisfaction. During this experience, I really had to face how hijacked my brain had become by spending, how it had created all of these little habit loops I never realized were there or were happening. When I'd be at the grocery store and I might like grab a little toy for my kids, or I'd be in Target getting toilet paper, or when I ran errands and I had to get myself a coffee. I had to step back and really realize how much unnecessary and honestly pointless purchases I had been making, because it doesn't feel like a lot when you're doing them, right? Mostly because a lot of our buying is sort of happening passively, like I said. Gerald Zaltman, he's a professor at Harvard Business School. He's been cited through various research in neuroscience and psychology. He says that 95% of our purchase decisions are made in the subconscious mind. So you really have to actively fight to stay in control, otherwise your brain will default to the subconscious because, well, it's easier, and as we have established, our brain loves easier. You don't have to learn to just resist the temptation of shopping. You have to learn how to push back against the invisible programming that your brain that's been training over thousands and thousands of purchases and habit loops and decades of ads and marketing. And this brings me back to my very initial thought of why did we have such a hard time sticking to our budgets? How come month after month we're left with the same budgeting powwow saying this was the month that we're really going to buckle down? And it's because the idea that we just needed more willpower was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Gotta love another idiom, you know?
I'll just stay here then, shall I, sir?
Willpower alone wasn't enough. You're up against dopamine and habit loops and mass marketing and frictionless spending. You have to be better equipped. And certainly, there are always things that we are going to need to purchase: groceries, household essentials. And once again, I truly don't believe there is anything wrong with buying things for yourself. This process hasn't made me think that you can't buy yourself nice clothes or a home decor piece that you love or enjoy a nice dinner out with friends. It hasn't made me think I can't never spend. What it's taught me is that you can get in control of your spending and you can still spend, but therein lies the answer. You want to be in control of your spending, not the other way around. And I don't want to forget to mention the elephant in the room that I'm sure people are already leaving comments, and that is that I am part of the problem. As I've struggled to contain my own overconsumption and overspending, I've also been forced to face my influence over other people's level of consumption. As I got caught up in my own overbuying, and then I pushed it here. While I have always stood very fast that I only share products I love, I don't share products if I don't genuinely enjoy them or think they're good. It's a blurred line between buying and overbuying, even if it's a product that I deem worthy. And while I am aware you all have free will, and I never made anyone buy anything, I can't pretend that by being in the influencing industry that I wasn't adding to the overconsumption problem. And the truth hurts, but I'm not too proud to say it. And so this process has really forced me to step back and look at this. And I'm not saying I'm never going to mention a product or share brands that I love, because I do and I will. As I keep saying, I don't think the answer to overbuying is never buying. But just as I've realized awareness is the key when it comes to my own buying in my personal life, I plan to be even more aware of how and when I share it here too. When I went into my no-buy month, I expected to save some money and maybe reset my spending habits. What I did not expect was to have to face the truth about my spending and come to the realization that I was making pointless purchases because I was unaware of what was driving it. And so I have made a few changes in my life. One, I've done my best to remove frictionless spending from my life. This means I do not have any shopping apps on my phone, not any. That's right, I don't have Amazon on my phone, I don't have DoorDash, there's no Instacart, there's no Target app, none of them. I don't save credit cards to my computer. I have to manually type them in when I want to buy something. This little bit of barrier can be enough pause to disrupt the habit loop and make me think. Number 2 is I have learned to group buying things. So when I do buy things, because yes, I still make purchases, I group them. So in the past, the way that I would do this is I would think of something I needed and then buy it. Think of something I needed and then buy it. Now, if I think of something I need, I add it to my cart, and then once a week or so, I go into the cart and reassess. I'm not checking out at the time of thinking. I'm coming back when I'm not in the habit loop, so I have a different mindset and I'm able to look at the things more critically. Number 3, I've become more aware of emotional spending triggers. I have gotten better at teaching myself to take a pause and ask, do I need this now? Or why am I actually buying this? I found a really simple routine replacements to shopping, like writing something down that I'm thinking of buying instead of just buying it, like I mentioned before, or asking myself if I have something similar that I could use instead. I force myself to exhaust any other avenues, making buying the last one. Number 4, I've realized not only can I live with less, but I actually enjoy it. I realize there's far more joy in the freedom of not buying than there is in the little dopamine spike from shopping. Because of this, I find myself myself really being a lot more critical of prospective purchases. Am I buying this because I really need it or because of what it's promising me? Will I still want this in a month? Is this actually a solution or is this just a distraction? And number 5, I've been pulling back some pieces of my own business and thinking about how I want to navigate it moving forward. How can I continue to share products that I love, that I legitimately think make my life easier and better, without stoking the fire of overconsumption? And I can't promise that I'm going to do this perfectly, but I do promise that I always work to be a little bit better. So doing a no-buy month didn't really go exactly how I expected. I didn't just save money, I was able to gain awareness. And now that I see all of the invisible strings that are pulling at my spending habits, dopamine, convenience, emotion, habit loops, I can't unsee them. It's not about never buying anything again. It's about finally freeing myself so that I feel like I am the one making the call. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and others, and I will see you all in my next video.